Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Subconscious Medicine. It's Ella, and welcome. Um, Coming at you so hot today, so hot. My my AC in my apartment is currently broken, and of course, this happens the one week that all the employees of my building, are away on some training or I don't even know. So perfect timing, perfect timing. So it's currently set. My AC thermostat thing is set at 64 and it's 77 degrees in my apartment. So that's just wonderful, but it's okay. We're thriving. It's kind of like a sauna, honestly. It just really sucks when you have to sleep and it's so hot. I'm like someone who likes to be really cold when I sleep, but that's besides the point. Anyways, how are you guys? I hope you're doing good. I hope you're enjoying your week so far. Um, my upload schedule is a little bit off. It's been pretty hectic. I went home this past weekend, to visit my family and my boyfriend, so that was fun. And then this coming weekend, I'm going to New Orleans to visit my best friend. So lots of travel in the future. But it's good. I like to stay busy. Like to switch it up sometimes. Also, if you know me, you know I love nothing more than an airport. So, yeah, we're living the life. So today I wanted to do something that I feel like I do all the time, but pretty unintentionally. Like people do stuff like this all the time, in a really informal way, but I have like some sporadic thoughts all the time about younger me, like little Ella, and what she dreamed about, and sort of like how I envisioned my life at certain ages or thresholds. And looking back, most of those things didn't necessarily work out as planned, but that is not to say that little me wouldn't be proud of the person that I am today, or the things I've accomplished, or lessons I've learned. Um, And yeah, I think about little me all the time. Honestly, fundamentally, I don't feel like my personality's changed all that much um throughout my childhood and like into adolescence. I feel like my parents instilled some pretty concrete values in me and my siblings when we were really little, and I don't really feel like I've steered very much away from those. That being said, I've obviously developed opinions of my own about specific things that may not be consistent with that which my parents believe, but I flourished into my own, but I don't think I'm all that different from my younger self. I think she would be proud of a lot of the things that I've accomplished in my young adulthood, and I say this with hesitance because most of the time modern me isn't even proud of these things, or at least I don't take the time to recognize these accomplishments and pride myself in them. I think we live in a day and age that's just so fast paced that a lot of times we don't have that time and the luxury to sort of self reflect and think about the strides that we've made and congratulate ourselves, which I think is really important. Um, and I guess we do this sometimes, like I said, in really informal ways. I'm thinking of like journaling or, and I'm not someone who journals per se, but I can think of one person in my life who I know writes literally everything that ever happens to her in her notes app. And I guess in a way that's kind of journaling, um, and recording thoughts and feelings and etc. Right? But yeah, I don't really think I, as an individual, consciously at least, take time to think about my own successes and really reflect on the growth that I've made. And I guess I touched on this last episode, but I really do feel like I'm in a huge period of growth and change, and as scary as that is, it's also really exciting. And I fear sometimes that it's happening so quickly that even little milestones I might overlook in the near future. And I don't want to do that. I want to commemorate myself for all of the growth that I've endured. And I feel like the only way to do that adequately is to truly reflect on it. And hopefully make this a regular um, practice too, right? Like engaging in this reflection once every 2, 3, 4, 5 years is not really conducive to that end goal. So I hope that we can all incorporate this into our lives a little bit more regularly because I really do think it's important. So I don't know. I've drafted out a few things that came to mind, but as I always say, like I want this to be informal and I'm sure that some things will come up um, as we chit chat. I also love that I say as we chit chat as if you guys are responding to me. I don't know if you guys do this, but when I listen to podcasts, I feel like I'm not saying them out loud, but like my thoughts are running like rampant, and I feel like I'm having a conversation with the person even though obviously they're not engaging in my thought pattern and like responding in any way, but I don't know. It just makes it feel a little bit more interactive. But okay. Okay. So, first thing that I think little me, I don't know, oh, whoa. I feel like I just had a little bit of deja vu there, but okay. I don't know why it's just popped into my head, but I wanted to say there, little Midge, which I realize I can't say because most people would have no idea what that means. But if you didn't know, my nickname, like all my life, it feels like, although realistically, it probably didn't come about to like maybe middle school, but my family calls me Midge. Basically, no one calls me Ella unless I'm like in trouble. But my immediate family, everyone calls me Midge. And its origin story is uh not very elaborate, but basically I have two older sisters, but the oldest sibling and me look, well, I don't think so, but everyone else says that we look alike. If you ask me, she's like Target and I'm Walmart, like I'm 1000% the Walmart version of her, but that's besides the point. So everyone says that we look similar, which at face value, I guess we have some similar characteristics. We have very similar eyes, well, eye color at least. Her eyes are definitely bigger. We have the same nose. Oh my god, nose. We have the same chin. I don't know. We definitely have some similar qualities, but people seem to think we look like identical. But yeah, so I was the midget version of her. So it started out as midget, then progressed to midgie, whatever. But all this to say, everyone in my family calls me Midge, and I was about to say things that little Midge would be proud of me for, or things I want to tell my little self. But anyways, okay. So first up is I wish I could go back to my athlete self and just encourage her to realize that she is so much more than an athlete. And don't get me wrong, I cherish my days on the softball field, and I truly believe that my years and years and years of hard work on the field as an athlete have contributed substantially to who I am and what I value and things that are important to me, and I wouldn't take that away for the world. But I, looking back, recognize just how much of my self-worth I put in my identity as an athlete, and I just wish I dipped my toes into to other skills and other hobbies at the same time. And I don't think that means taking anything away from my skill set or my dedication to being an athlete, but I do think that I poured so much of my self-worth into being an athlete to the extent of constantly feeling like I was a failure, like I wasn't good enough. And obviously, that's not true. Like, all things considered, I was a pretty successful athlete for what my goals looked like. And again, like, I wouldn't take back my experiences for the world. I had a wonderful time and I got really good at something I really loved. Um, but that chapter closed there, in large part due to injury, but I was forced to sort of end that chapter and embark on a new one that didn't involve sports, right? So, like, obviously, I engage in physical activity to this day, but not in like an organized sport manner, just, in a, like, I go to the gym and I go and I run and whatever. But that's completely self-driven. I'm not part of a team anymore. But with closing that chapter, so many additional opportunities have come my way that wouldn't have been an option had I still been an athlete. Um, for instance, right, packing my bags and moving to Florida and embarking on this journey. If I was an athlete and tied down to a team, that wouldn't necessarily be an opportunity, or even if it was, it wouldn't be as simple um, as it felt to me last year. Um, or choosing a school in the first place to attend, had I had to really go through that process with an athlete perspective, that would have looked a lot different. The types of schools that I would have applied to would have not necessarily looked the same. Um, and I just wish I could tell my little self that being an athlete was just one aspect of my identity, and I had so much more value to bring to other aspects of life that didn't necessarily revolve around a sport. So yeah, I look at my past athlete self with grace because I know that she struggled a lot to see her self-worth outside of athletics. And that kind of breaks my heart, but I think that's a line that a lot of athletes struggle with, right? Like, right now we're sort of going through what seems like a crisis, um, in terms of that intersection between college sports or professional sports and mental health. I can't even begin to think of all the athletes I know that have struggled with mental health, let alone the amount of athletes that have gone to extreme self harm measures related to mental illness, of which maybe their sport contributed to, but it's it's horrific to see, and I'm not implying that this is anyone's fault or anyone, let alone anyone's intention, but there has to be a better way, right? There has to be a better way that we can balance being a student athlete. And I think about it in my own experiences, right? Which all things considered was pretty on a pretty micro level. I wasn't a college athlete. I was a competitive athlete on a travel team in high school, which looks much different. Um, but at the end of the day, we call these people student athletes, and yet it seems that athletics really runs the course, right? And school sort of falls to the side. Um, and I can't imagine that pressure. I feel stressed without a sport on my plate, and I can't imagine balancing the two. I give people who are able to do that so much credit, and I really do think they're superheroes in and of themselves, but there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way for us to support those individuals, right? And ensure that they're being the best athlete that they can be, and they're working hard at their sport, and they're getting better, and they're competing at a high level, all the while dedicating time to their studies and becoming young professionals, and most importantly, taking care of themselves. Um, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your teammates, you can't take care of your friends. And we see so many athletes struggle to carve out time for themselves, doing things that they enjoy other than their sport. Because when you're a student athlete, your sport becomes a job. It's in essence, a part time job that you are forced to participate in, despite the fact that you like it, though that may be true, right? And I hope it's true. You don't have a choice when you want to practice, or if you want to practice for that matter. Your schedule is structured for you in a way that may or may not be, how you envisioned or how you want. But ultimately, it's not up to you. At that point, you're a representative of a university or of a college, and those things are no longer in your control. And that's why I think it's so important for us to, you know, give back some control to student athletes in terms of their own well-being and their own mental health. And again, this is a macro level problem. I'm not saying that I have an answer, but this is something I think about a lot, no longer being an athlete, and think sort of envisioning my life had I chosen a different path for myself. Um, and I just think it's something that needs a little bit more attention. But ultimately, I wish I could tell my little self that she was a lot more than an athlete. And that's something I want to tell some of my friends who are athletes now. But much easier said than done, of course. Okay, transitioning a bit. This next one is something I'm still working through, certainly, but you're never gonna love everything about yourself. And I just think that that's a dialogue that we have to let go of. And listen, I'm the first proponent of self-care and self-love and building confidence. I completely understand and respect those things through and through. But there is a type of discomfort one feels when they don't love something about themselves, whether this be physical, internal, it really doesn't matter. Maybe it's a characteristic about yourself, maybe it's a quality or a trait, maybe it's a body part, right? But regardless, there's a type of discomfort you feel when you're engaging, in that unloving, like internal dialogue. And I think that's just part of life. I think that that is an opportunity for personal growth. And I don't really see there being an end to that. I can sit here and give you a list of all the things I don't love about myself. And that list will likely look different in a year, 2 years, or 10 years from now. But I don't think that there's ever going to be a time and place where there's no list. I think about just physically. I could work my butt off trying to get to this idealized body or whatever. And, in 15 years, I have, or whatever, 10, 15 years, I have a kid, and all of a sudden, my body looks completely differently. Or maybe in 10 years, the, like, Kim K, hourglass figure, whatever, isn't idealized anymore, but the Kendall Jenner, like, skinny girl, 10 or 6 foot, is glamorized, right? Like, these these trends and beauties are ever changing, and there's never going to be a point where you fully love everything about your body. And the same thing when it comes to traits or characteristics about yourself, right? In this era of my life, I'm a student, and I've talked extensively about how I put a lot of value in my education, and to the point where it's extremely maladaptive. And something I really don't like about myself is the fact that I never feel confident. I never feel prepared for a test or for a quiz, or, I never feel confident submitting a paper. I just don't. And it doesn't matter how much time I dedicate to it, or, how many revisions I've made. I just don't feel confident. And that's not really something I've ever experienced. I've never experienced confidence in terms of my academic preparation. And it's odd because I've experienced confidence in a lot of different aspects of life, but school has really never been one of those. And it's something I don't love about myself. And in 5, 10 years, maybe I won't be a student, but I will be, I will assume some other identity, whether that be a working professional, whether that be a mom, whether that be, whatever it is. But the point being that I likely will experience a lack of confidence in those areas as well. And as opposed to beating myself up for not loving every aspect of my body, I question what life would look like if we just took that same energy and accepted the fact that we don't love everything about ourselves and, you know, use that time to develop strategies to better cope with that, or to develop skills that counteract that lack of confidence or that lack of self-love. um I think it's important that we get used to that type of discomfort and accept that we're never going to love it all. Yeah, I think that this is a dangerous line that we're teetering on right now. And again, I want to reiterate that I fully support the self-love journey and that sort of dialogue and public discourse that's happening. And I don't want to take attention away from that, but I do really believe that it is a dangerous idea to insinuate that people, particularly women who are sort of targeted in this dialogue, but that people are supposed to love every aspect about themselves. That's not reality, right? We live in a world of comparison. We live in a world of constant social feedback, and I don't think it's fair to suggest that we need to love every aspect of ourselves. What I do think is fair, though, is to recognize the things that we love about ourselves, pour our self worth into those things, and then dedicate conscious effort and time to practice appreciating the things that we don't love about ourselves. And maybe this needs to be really intentional, but you know to recognize a characteristic or a trait about yourself and appreciate it does not mean to love it. um I'm thinking about um pregnancy. I follow a YouTuber who recently had a child, and she talks a lot about her changing body, and something that she said that really resonated with me despite not being pregnant, but obviously, um, you know, like appreciating your body and body dysmorphia and things like that are things that people my age are constantly talking about. But regardless, she was saying, I don't love my postpartum body. I loved the way I looked prior to giving birth much more, but I appreciate this body much more than I appreciated my prior body. And she goes on to say how it's not until you give birth that you recognize sort of the wonders of the female body and like all the things it's capable of. And I think that's extremely um, valuable. And I thought her take was pretty interesting. Like I said, she recognized not necessarily loving her postpartum body as much as she did previously, but that didn't take away from the fact that she couldn't accept it and appreciate it for what it was worth. Okay. The next one is pretty hard hitting due to some recent events, but nevertheless, I think this is something that we can all use a constant reminder of sometimes. But for me specifically, this is something that I feel like I really struggled to grapple with when I was younger. I've pretty much consistently been a people pleaser all my life. And I struggle to use that word because I know that that's something that's pretty frowned upon. I actually don't hate it about myself. I think there's value in caring and respecting about other people's opinions. I do obviously think that, there comes a point where other opinions shouldn't navigate your life for you, but I do think they could be valuable, and depending on who they're coming from, and if they were warranted or respected. Um, but I feel like when I was little, there were people in my life who either, I didn't have a relationship with, or who pretty outwardly didn't care about me, who I kind of just expected would. Um, and I think this is a cultural thing in large part, but there are people in our lives that we expect to love us and expect to show up for us. And when they don't, it's pretty not only disheartening, but it's at least for me, it's pretty thought provoking, and I think it speaks a lot to um our culture and sort of what we expect out of people. For instance, we expect our parents to care about us and love us. We expect our grandparents to care about and love us, our siblings, our teachers. There are just certain people in your life that you interact with, and we have pretty stark expectations of these people. And, I think that in and of itself is setting us up for a little bit of failure because we can't control what other people do or say or think or believe, right? We don't have control over those things, but to place expectations on those people, despite that lack of control, seems a little counterintuitive. Um, and so, anyways, I feel like from an early age, I had, a person or a few people in my life whom I expected to have a relationship with, expected to be close with, expected to love and care about, and, have those same feelings reciprocated, and they weren't. Um, and I think this was sort of the origins of that people pleasing behavior. Um, and now that I'm older and this pattern seems to continue, I recognize that you just can't make people care about you. If someone doesn't care to learn who you are, to appreciate your strengths, to recognize your weaknesses, to develop a relationship with you, if someone doesn't care to do that, they're not worth your time, right? Building a relationship and sustaining that relationship is a two-way street, and it cannot be done successfully by one person. One individual cannot build a relationship because that requires vulnerability from two people. And if one person isn't willing to give and take, you know, and fulfill their responsibilities in building that relationship, it's not going to be worthwhile. And I think for so long I I put so much of my value in, the number of people that cared about me. And I put so much effort into making people that didn't seem to care about me want to care. And I've learned that even if they're supposed to care about you, even if, you know, they're supposed to have a relationship with you, if you spend your whole life trying to make other people recognize your worth, you're never going to fulfill your potential. Think about all the energy you would have to dedicate to just showing a single person what it is that you have to offer this world, your value. How much time would it take to show that to them? And what else could you have accomplished in that same amount of time? And shared those accomplishments with the people that already care about you. People, as much as it sucks, they don't owe anything to you. And if a person makes the conscious decision to not want to have a relationship with you or not want to continue a relationship with you, that's their decision to make. And you can feel any type of way about that, and I'm not here to invalidate your feelings in any way, but to take the time to force them or attempt to force them to get to like you is not it's simply not worth it. I would so much rather take that same amount of energy and dedicate it to continuing to progress in the areas of life that I value and sharing that with people that do care about me and who want to share those successes with me. And I think that this is something that's become particularly apparent to me in recent years because as I sort of enter adulthood, there comes a time where I feel like it just sort of clicks that you're truly only in control of your own life and you can't take the reins of of other people and how they think and how they behave and what it is that they believe. People are going to formulate their own opinions, whether they're warranted or not, whether they're true or not, and those are going to direct the decisions that they make. You do not have control. If you're constantly fixated on gaining control that isn't yours to start with, what opportunities are you watching pass by? And that's scary to me, right? Like, I don't want to miss out on opportunities in general, let alone for people that don't care about me. I don't want to miss out on anything for those people. Just, I think about younger me and I feel so bad that no one really sat down and told her. And I don't really know that I would have been receptive to this at a much younger age than when I figured it out for myself. But I think about how much time she spent trying to encourage people that didn't care about her to appreciate what her value and what it was that she brought to the table. I could have spent that same amount of time doing something much more worthwhile. And I don't regret that. I think that was a lesson that I needed to learn, and I think that's a lesson a lot of us need to learn. And again, something I'm still actively working on as I encounter more adults that, may or may not appreciate what it is that I bring to the table. But I do wish I could just sit down with little Ella and sort of, encourage her to really think about how she delegated her time and her energy and her attention and direct it to people that really cared and really appreciated the value that I bring. Okay, the next one is like what I think is going to be an unpopular opinion. And to be honest, I feel really passionate about this, and I think the reason I do is because I feel like this is not a lot of people share this belief with me. But I truly feel that life doesn't ever become comfortable. There's never we constantly reiterate, oh, when it's an easier time, when it's a better time, we'll do this, this, and this. There's not gonna be a better time. Life is not gonna slow down. It's not gonna be more convenient later on. It's not gonna be it's just not. And in my opinion, if life ever does become comfortable and easy, you're not working hard enough. Think about how many opportunities we have in this life. And I say this from a very privileged perspective. Um in a life full of opportunities, some of which I worked for, some of which have definitely been handed to me. Um and for that I'm grateful, but that doesn't take away my privilege. And I sit here and think, like, when have I ever had an easy phase of life? When have I ever been comfortable? When have things been, convenient? They're not. And I've lived 20 years, and if I'm lucky, this is only maybe a fourth of my life. But if I've learned anything in the last 20 years, when I've had the least responsibility I'll have in my entire life, it is that there's no convenient time. There's no time when life is easy and things are simple and decisions seem obvious, though that time is never gonna come. And if you constantly sit back and wait for that time to come, you will never, ever, achieve anything of some substance. I'm not here to take anything away from people who are naturally talented. And this kind of relates to that quote I was talking about, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. But we live in a world that values talent in terms of school and like the education system in general, in terms of professional life and in the workplace. And I think talent is important and it can take you a long way. But we also live in a world that overlooks work ethic. And in my opinion, work ethic is a far more valuable asset than talent. Obviously, if you can have both, that's sort of the best of both worlds, but we all have a series of responsibilities, some of which are handed to us, some of which we assume on our own. For instance, um, I have a responsibility to show up to work. This is a choice that I made. I made my schedule. Getting this internship was something that was entirely self driven. And so, I have a responsibility that I've chosen. I also, though, have a responsibility to be a daughter, to be a sibling, to be a granddaughter, things that I didn't necessarily choose to become, but things that require work on my end to maintain. Particularly when I'm 1,400 miles away from home, and that becomes a little bit harder. Um, but we all have things on our plate. And to sit back and compare, one's responsibilities to another, we could do that all day. But the truth of the matter is that people do work harder than you. There are people with more on their plate. And I don't say this to encourage a spiraling of comparison and etc., but I say that to encourage people to work harder, or to at the very least reflect and recognize how hard it is that they work. There are people in this world that could work at 50% all of their life and succeed at X, Y, and Z. The question becomes, though, is the extra 10% to work at 60% all of the time worth the product? So, for instance, if I study for an exam for 10 hours and I'm guaranteed a B, but I want an A, but that requires an extra 5 hours, is the extra 5 hours worth it for the product? In this case, the product being the grade. That's a decision we have to make. And we subconsciously make those decisions all of the time. When we prepare for an exam, when we show up to work, when we apply for a job or apply for graduate school or do whatever. We're constantly making those decisions. But it has become such a habitual practice that we crave this sense of comfort. And, granted, that comfort looks different for everyone, but the comfort in essence is, how much do I have to put in to get my desired output? Whether that be in school, whether that be at work, how many hours do I have to put in to get my desired paycheck? How many hours do I have to put in to get my desired grade? How much money do I have to put in rent to get my desired apartment? Like, we're constantly making those decisions. They're a little bit, less intentional at times, but we're in essence chasing this type of stability or comfort that I truly just don't feel exists in this life. And if it does for some people, if life becomes quote comfortable or stable, I question, how hard is it that you're really working? And maybe you're okay with that. Maybe people are okay with working, at a consistent standard and sort of reaping the positive and negative consequences of that. But In my eyes, the extra work is always worth it. Maybe it'll pay off immediately, maybe it'll pay off down the line, but the extra work will always pay off. I don't think this is necessarily something I took for granted when I was little. In fact, this is something little me did. And I felt discouraged at times because I didn't feel like I experienced the immediate gratification that I was hoping, or the immediate approval from others that I was hoping. And I wish I could just go back and talk to younger me, and I really do think it would make her smile to hear someone say that the hard work will pay off. And I mean, people throw that phrase around all the time despite people not working hard. um in my eyes, hard work is not about time necessarily. It's not about money. It's about how much you could have given and how much you did give. It's a ratio, and it is directly tied to success in every way. Genuinely feel that way, right? I've had this conversation with a friend recently about pay, like workplace pay, and we were talking about how some professions pay a lot and they seem to be stupid. The example that's always thrown around is the influencer example. Influencers are paid so much and they don't deserve it, and we should, delegate more money to teachers, let's say. And listen, I'm not saying that teachers don't deserve more money. I truly believe that, and I value my education, and for that reason I do believe that teachers should be adequately paid, and the amount that they make right now is not that. But that being said, I also think it's important to recognize how that pay scale works. So, essentially, at least in the US, we operate on a risk percentage pay scale. In other words, we indicate a given profession, we evaluate its risk, and we pay accordingly. For instance, people who are sort of paid the most in life. Um, let's take a surgeon, for example. So when a surgeon goes into work and they enter the operating room and there's a man with a bullet hole in their chest laying on the table, they're in an extremely riskful environment, right? There's an entire human being's life on the table, literally, right? And they are solely responsible. Now there's other people in the room. Certainly there's nurses, there's maybe an anesthesiologist, there's whomever, other medical professionals, of course, but if that person dies on the operating table, who calls time of death? The doctor. Who has to report the information to the family? The doctor, right? So they're solely responsible for that person's life. They're an extremely risky profession. A rewarding one, definitely. When you're able to save a human being's life, that's amazing. But a risky profession nonetheless, and they are paid based off of that risk. Think of any business you can think of, whether it be a restaurant, a manufacturing company, a car dealership, whatever it is, right? There's going to be a manager of some sort, a sales manager, a restaurant manager, whomever. Why are they labeled with that term? Well, they're labeled with that term because they are the most at risk employee in that establishment. So if anything goes wrong, who do you blame? The manager, not the cashier, not the person making your sandwich in the back, but the manager. So in every workplace, there is, a person or multiple people whom are particularly at risk when they go in for work. And their pay is reflective of that. So now let's think back to the teacher example. So are teachers at risk? Well, some may argue yes, the kids are their responsibilities when they're at school for the day. And that's true. But if anything were to happen to a child, generally speaking, who would report that type of information to a parent? Likely not the teacher. It would typically be a nurse, possibly, like if a health issue had sort of erupted, it might be a nurse, but even more often would be a principal or a vice principal. Those people are in riskful positions and they are paid more. And again, I'm not here to bash on teachers. I do think that they should be paid more. But we live in a world that is designed to pay people based off of risk. And oh my god, this feels like such a tangent. I don't even remember how we got here. But we were talking about work ethic. So in essence, I wish people would have appreciated my work ethic when I was little, but I do really think that it gave me a valuable experience, one that I'm appreciative of now. And I also think that it has contributed to my current work ethic and my sort of threshold for working hard. And I think I'm not here to boast myself up in any way, but I do think it's higher than most people. And I'm not saying that that's a good nor bad thing, but it means that I'm able to push myself to dedicate more time and effort to things that I care about. And I guess you know, whether it's right or wrong, I get frustrated when people insinuate that they work so hard at something and either they don't recognize their privilege or their sort of leg up or advantages, or they simply aren't working hard but insinuate that they are. And that really frustrates me. And I'm not saying that this is a good quality. In fact, this is something that I'm actively working on. As someone who I don't feel like has a great work life balance, but it does frustrate me when people, are sort of all talk. Like they insinuate that they work so hard at school or at their profession, or I don't know, whatever the case may be. And I question that sometimes. I'm like, okay, you know, how hard do you really work? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people do work a lot harder than I think, but I think particularly in the college space, college age kids uh tend to be dramatic about how much effort they put in. I always think this becomes particularly apparent when professors throw around that rule, kind of like unspoken rule, I guess, but at least I don't know. I've attended two universities and it's been the same at both, so I don't know if this is a universal thing, but at both the schools I've attended, the like policy handbook whatever is recommends students to dedicate 3 hours outside of the classroom to studying or homework or preparing for every hour that they spend inside the classroom. So for instance, if your class meets 3 times a week for 1 hour each, you meet for 3 hours every week. The expectation is that for 9 hours every week outside of those class times that you're studying, doing homework, whatever. Obviously, that's not the case for most kids, and I'm not saying it's even the case for me. For some classes, maybe, for others, definitely not. But people want to say that they work so hard, and I'm thinking to myself, are you even doing the bare minimum? If the minimum expectation is that you spend 3 times the amount of time outside classes you do in, are you even doing that? And I'm not always doing that either, but where we throw around that working hard phrase all of the time, and I think it's something that we sort of devalued in a way that I really think we should think more about and use a little bit more intentionally. Um, yeah. So again, I wish I could talk to little me and encourage her to keep working hard and recognize that life's not going to get easy. This hard work isn't going to go away anytime soon, but it will definitely pay off. And I think I've seen that happen for me or start to happen a little bit, and it's really rewarding. And I'm excited to see what continues to happen in the future, which I'm sure will be even more fruitful. Next item on the docket. This one is I kind of think is funny. It's lighthearted in my eyes. But love. The idea of like loving a partner, a family member, a friend, whatever. This I firmly believe is the most overused word in the English vocabulary. We throw around the word love when we're talking about Trader Joe's, Target, our significant other. Like it is just overused in our culture to the extent that I truly don't think people know what it means at all anymore. And I'm by no means saying that I have a concrete definition of it either, but something I've learned as I've welcomed more people into my life that I do truly feel like I love is that there is a shift that occurs when you go from appreciating someone and valuing someone to loving them. And to me, it's a pretty stark change, and it's very easy to pinpoint. Um, and for me, that is when the things that the other person care about become important to you. So, for instance, I have been with my partner for about 4.5 years now. And I love him. And, I say that pretty frequently. This is weird because I don't ever talk about him, but he, he's a pilot. And flying is something that he loves. It's a true passion for him. Um, it's definitely part of his identity, and he loves it with all his heart, and he's so knowledgeable, and he's really great at it. Um, just a huge, huge, huge part of his life. And for me, I'm not a pilot, obviously. Um, I, in fact, hadn't been on my first plane until I was like 13 or 14 years old. Um, and since then, have mostly traveled to see him, um, or with him, with the extent of flying to and from school. Um, but I couldn't care less about aviation if you asked me 5 years ago. I didn't know anything about airlines. I didn't know anything about planes. I didn't know anything about the FAA, which, if you don't know anything about planes, you wouldn't even know what that means. Didn't know anything about travel or like I didn't know because I didn't care, didn't pertain to my life, didn't grow up in a family that traveled very frequently. It wasn't in my ballpark. And when we first started dating, I would ask very surface level questions about it, just to sort of start conversation. But over the years, I have come to love and appreciate the work that he does, and I've come to learn so much about aviation and about airlines and airports and planes and aerodynamics and like all of these things, right? And I had a moment recently um where I sat back and I was like, wow, Ellie, you know a lot more about this stuff than the average person. Obviously, I don't know enough, nearly half the amount that he knows, but I know a lot more than the average person. And I had a moment where I really like engaged in a moment of reflection, and I said to myself, why do you take the time to learn about this? Why do you follow pilots on Instagram or on TikTok? Why do you watch YouTube videos about aviation? Why do you look at flights and try to recognize patterns? Why do you ask questions and probe him to learn more? And I thought about it for a while. And finally, it came to me, and it was sort of like a light bulb moment. And I said to myself, I was like, you know what? I care. This is important to me. And, I chose to welcome someone into my life who, this was his world, or this is his world. And I welcomed them into my life, and I grew to love this person, and this is something that's important to them. It lights up their day, it makes them smile, it makes them feel valuable. And I now have a relationship with that person, and it has gotten to the point where the things that um make him happy, and the things that interest him, they now interest me, and I care. And vice versa, right? He's someone who doesn't care about certain things that are really important to me, and now he has grown to care about those things, and has a desire and an urgency to learn more about them because I know about them. Um and again, I sort of had that moment maybe 2 years into maybe 2 years into our relationship. And you know honestly, I had said I love you much earlier than that, but I said to myself, I think that this is what separates, having a valuable friendship to truly loving someone, is when the things that they appreciate and care about and are interested in now become important and valuable to you. Despite maybe never having a previous interest in them before, doesn't really matter. Um, I have another friend whom is an EMT. Um, I am not an EMT. I don't even want to work in the medical field, nor do I have any medical experience. But I have grown to learn a lot about the EMT world, about EMS, and I genuinely am interested now. And I've heard so many stories, and I love to hear them, and I find them really fascinating, really interesting. Um, but again, this comes from a person that I really love and I value and I appreciate. And so if it's important to her, it's now important to me. As someone who wants to call her my friend, I'm going to appreciate the things that she does, and a large part of that is being an EMT. Um and again, those are just a few examples. I could say, I could go on and on about other people in my life whom I feel this is also true about, but in general, I think I've come to realize that, at least for me, the difference truly is marked by that shift where the things that are valuable or important to another person then become a part of your identity. Um, and again, I really just think that this word is so overused, and I'm not sure that that's a dangerous thing. I don't necessarily think that people do it maliciously, but I do think that if we continue down that road, we could possibly devalue what the word means entirely. We throw around the word as if it doesn't really have any weight behind it, and I'd argue it has a lot of weight behind it. And I think you only really recognize that when you do come to love a person or a thing. Um, but I think in general, if you were to identify any two things that you say you love on a given day, and then really think about how much you value each, they likely wouldn't be the same. I think about those two people, my partner and my best friend, and the love I have for them obviously looks different, but I love them equally. Um and I can say that with confidence, but then I think about something else I say I love. I say I love, you know, I say I love sushi, for instance. Well, I have sushi maybe once a month. I talk to those people every day of my life. And that's obviously a silly example, but the point being that we use a word with a lot of weight, um, pretty nonchalantly. And I just think that this is something that I would have encouraged my younger self to be more careful about. I think I let a lot of people into my life that I didn't love, but I appreciated or I tolerated or I valued even. Um, and whether I explicitly said, I love you, or I did things that insinuated that I loved them, I wish I protected my peace a little bit more and was a little bit less generous with my love. Um, and was more intentional with who I shared that with. And again, I don't say this to beat younger me up or regret any decisions that I made or people that I welcomed into my life, but I say it to encourage um encourage people to think about what that means to them a little bit, and be a little bit more deliberate with who they share that with. So yeah, I think that's something that little Ella definitely could have benefited from hearing. Again, I don't hate her for it in any way. But I do think that's a lesson we all have to learn at some point. And usually that lesson is sort of um kickstarted when that person does enter your life that you love. Again, whether that's a friend, maybe a mentor, maybe a partner, maybe a thing too, maybe an activity like a sport or whatever it is. But nonetheless, when something enters your life that you love and that you choose to welcome in. Um, okay, last one. No one wants to hear about your success. I'm sorry. They don't. They simply don't. And again, this is a hard lesson that I've had to learn, but I think I genuinely feel like being humble is someone's greatest asset. And people who constantly have to reiterate their successes and their accomplishments are people that are not only insecure with themselves, but people who feel the need to share their success are people who don't feel confident in others' ability to recognize it on their own. And I clearly feel really passionate about this, but there's nothing I hate more than when people list off their accomplishments. Or what's even worse to me is when people have to explicitly say that they're a good person. If you are a good person, people will see that in you. You do not need to share it. In fact, you saying that you're a good person delegitimizes your ability to be a good person. I'm not saying that I'm a great person. I'm not saying that I have all these accomplishments or whatever, or I'm the most humble human being either for that matter, but I certainly don't go around boasting about those things um because I don't feel the need to. Not to mention the fact that if someone can't see in you that you're a good person, do you really want them to be a part of your life? If someone can't recognize your accomplishments and place value in those things, do you want them to be a part of your life? Likelihood is not. No, right? So, why is it that our instinct is to share those things about ourselves? Those things will come up in conversation, right? In the same way that I've shared with people that I'm close with, that I love, that I appreciate, that I value about my own accomplishments, whether that be, when I was getting into colleges or my accomplishments as an athlete or receiving a scholarship or winning some award or getting a job or whatever, right? Those are things that I share with people that I care about because they share the same appreciation for those successes as I do. People who feel the need to introduce themselves with their accolades are people who do not feel confident in their ability to develop a relationship without them. People who don't feel confident in their ability to communicate with others and to build connection and build community with other people. They're people who place themselves on a pedestal of their accomplishments and their successes in order to sort of peer over their weaknesses. Um, and I wish I could tell my little self what I've learned when it comes to people who boast about their successes, to savor some time. Um, Again, as I mentioned, little me was such a people pleaser that I feel like I didn't really build my own evaluations about people. I simply welcomed them into my life, uh, really without much hesitation. And I wish I was more careful. I wish I was more diligent about getting to know people beyond their successes or failures, um, and appreciating who they were. Um, Again, we throw around that word love and say we have all these friends and whomever. And in my opinion, most people who we refer to as friends are truly just acquaintances. They're not friends, right? They don't have the qualities that a typical friend would have. You don't have the conversations with them in a way that is consistent with friendship. They're really acquaintances. For some reason, the word friend seems to be a little bit more comforting to us than acquaintance, and so we rely on that term. But people who are the difference between the acquaintance and the friend is rooted in your connection to that person, your ability to be vulnerable with that person. And it's particularly hard to be vulnerable with people who are really, really lacking any type of confidence that is substantial and is beyond their surface level successes. Um yeah, I don't know. This is, I feel like, going to be a hot take for some people, but I do really wish I could go back and talk to little me and just encourage her um to second guess the people that she let into her life. And I think there's a space for those people. I do. Um but I think I do wish that I was a little bit more careful with the energy and time that I poured into people who didn't really not only value it but didn't deserve it. Um they didn't show any effort to really build connection, but rather an effort um, to sort of defend their self pride. I think that was a lesson that needed to be learned, um, but it's something I'm proud of myself now for. I think that's something I'm not perfect at it by any means, but I think I keep my circle pretty small now, and though that can be hard at times, it's something that I appreciate about myself and about other people too. Um, so yeah, that was maybe a harsh note to end on because I know again it might be a little bit controversial that no one wants to hear about your success. To reiterate, I'm not saying you can't share your successes with people that are already in your life that you care about. I'm just suggesting that those things are not interesting to people who you don't have relationships with. So instead of trying to make people respect you based off of your accolades, maybe earn people's respect by demonstrating your skills and your valuable assets. So, anyways, I wanted to end this episode again by just encouraging us to be a little bit more deliberate, and myself included, about reflecting on our own growth, um, and priding ourselves in the things that we get better at, um, in equal effort recognizing our weaknesses and consciously dedicating time to becoming better at those things, or at the very least developing strategies, to better evaluate our progress in those areas. I don't know, something easier said than done, 1000%, but I really do think reflection is an important part of life. Recognizing our strengths and weaknesses is incredibly important and comfortable, certainly, but I do think it's valuable. Um, so yeah, let me know if there's anything you would tell your little self. I'm really interested. There's definitely a lot more that I can think of. A lot more. Little me was, oh, she was crazy. She was a justice obsessed softball connoisseur. I don't even know. I thought I was like gonna be in Vogue, and I was all over the place. What little kid isn't though, honestly? But yeah, I think she would be proud of who I am now. And sometimes we need that reminder when we're not really proud of ourselves, which is a really hard thing to grapple with. I know life can seem a little daunting at times, and it's hard to be proud of ourselves and our progress. But in those moments, I think it's important to just think about our younger selves and realize that they truly couldn't imagine of the lives that we're living now. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I encourage you all to do the same, or at least attempt, in whatever way you feel would be most productive. Whether it's talking to yourself, to someone else, writing it down and journaling. Like I said, that's not something that works for me, but I know a lot of people really benefit from that exercise. So I really encourage you to find a way to reflect and sort of build it into a routine. Make it something that's consistently in your schedule. Um, because I think it can be really important. But thank you guys so much for listening. Um, I hope you know that these episodes are really therapeutic for me. So even if you don't benefit from them, I do. So we're going to keep doing them. But I do really, really, really appreciate your time and your ears. Thank you again. And I look forward to seeing you guys all next week. Bye.